Welcome to yet another episode of Simplifying Live. Today with me, Shashank. I'm your host and the CEO of Simplifying. And today I've got a very special guest with me, Alan Adamson. I've known Alan for over 10 years now, since he was in New York at Landor Associates. And by that time, he had already worked with the largest airlines in the world on their brand. Landor is known for doing some of the best airline branding work, and airline was heading that operation out of New York. And since then, Alan has written 4 books on not just marketing and branding, but a lot more, and started his new company called Metaphors. Alan, welcome to the show. It's so great to speak with you again.
Delighted to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, so tell me about this latest book, Alan. It's called Shift Ahead.
Yeah, and it came out of the fact that, more and more of my clients were calling up and saying, our sales are down, our market share is down, our lunch is being eaten by a competition. Can you help me? And oftentimes the issue was not their branding or their marketing or their advertising, but they had become their father's Oldsmobile, and they were becoming less relevant as a business, as an organization. And everyone talks about the pace of change. And I said, well, is it just me, or is the pace of change making it much more difficult to stay relevant and to market today? And so I went out and we did the research, and in fact, more and more companies, not just in the tech business, are having trouble keeping their head above water.
Now, this is interesting. You're saying the pace of change is so fast that companies cannot keep up. Do you have a set of rules or things that they can do to actually keep up?
Well, cutting to the chase, one of them is to realize that, success is never final. And there is a feeling that once you've solved a problem, you're good. You put up your feet on the desk and you open the champagne bottle. But even if you're successful, you're only successful for a moment. And it will be seconds before 3 competitors copy you and the world changes again. So, if there's one thing you can do as an industry or as a company or as an organization, is to realize that every day requires reinvention, not something you look at every 5 years in a strategic planning process.
Right. Now, that's very interesting, especially if we apply it to the airline context. Just by design, the airline industry is one in which you need to plan for 20 years because you're ordering a new plane. That will take 3 years to deliver. Right. Another 2 years for entry into service and planning the routes and everything. It's just a long game you play in aviation. So how can airlines shift ahead?
Well, I think, part of it is to realize that while they have to play the long game in terms of capital investment and some issues, they need to maintain as much agility in those decisions as possible to be able to tailor it on an annual basis or on a monthly basis if they have to. So, while the structure of the business is long-term, they really need to realize their customers are changing every 6 months in what's important to them. And if they're going to stay relevant, they're going to have to find a way to connect the long-term nature of their business with the ability to make, as we say in the sports world, call plays on the field.
Right. In your book, of course, you've got a very interesting conversation with Delta Airlines CEO. Yeah. What did he say about staying relevant?
I talked to Ed Bastian about what are the challenges of running a global airline and challenges he has in keeping Delta relevant and shifting it ahead. And I asked him, what's his most important focus point? When he thinks about every day, the challenges he faces from fuel costs to equipment. And he said, well, that's not the most important thing to me. The most important thing to him was making sure his employees were engaged and delighted and motivated every day, because he felt that if he could keep his employees happy, energized, and committed, then they would be able to keep their customers happy. Because if your employees are not engaged, your customers in the service business will not be happy. And he talked about that being, yes, everything's important, but if he does one thing right, he spends a lot of time with every employee, from the baggage handlers to the pilots to the gate agents, to make sure they're equipped to deliver a Delta experience, and they're motivated to deliver the type of experience he wants them to deliver.
This is very interesting. It does remind me of Southwest Airlines and their golden rule, which I mention in my book, Soar, which basically says the same thing. Take care of the employees, who will then take care of the customers, who will then take care of the shareholder. That's
right.
Southwest golden rule. In Delta's case, of course, they recently announced a big handout to the employees based on the tax benefit they got from the state of Georgia, which unfortunately got reversed. And they found themselves in a bit of a political pickle.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think Delta handled that situation?
I think there'll always be ups and downs. Mm-hmm. But if the CEO is laser focused on making sure every employee is happy, and what drives, as you know, the airline business is incredibly driven by word of mouth, and no one shares an ordinary experience. People share extraordinary good or extraordinary bad. And if he can get his employees to deliver more extraordinarily good and fewer extraordinarily bad, then over time, I think you're seeing the results in the marketplace.
Right, because these days, it's something I like to say in my speeches as well, airlines are either remarkable or invisible.
Right.
And what you're saying is plant as many remarkable moments as possible.
Right, and to do that, at least for Ed and Delta, problems will happen. And if he's got employees empowered to make decisions, because he talked about the challenge of flight crews and coming together from all over the country, and they instantly form, you of course know this, to create a team that's going to be with a passenger and solve a problem, be it at the airport or on the plane, and how important it is to have all those people energized and coming together and being terrific, and how hard that is. But if you get that right, passengers will put up with the peanuts being a little stale sometimes, or weather delay. But if they find that people around them don't care and are just going through the motion, the slightest technical challenge will upset passengers.
Yeah, I think this is boiling down to airlines being more human as well. Having a more human element to it rather than, you're right, going through the motions, because then there is no feeling involved in
exactly.
there.
Exactly.
Which airlines do you think do a good job of being humane, as well as, who are tuned in well for shifting ahead?
I think I obviously I have a fair degree of belief that Delta does a pretty good job, considering the size. The bigger the airline,
right,
the harder it is to pull that off, the route structure. But I think overall, compared to other large U.S. domestic carriers, mm-hmm. they are leading the pack. I think smaller airlines, who built the culture around the people, whether it's JetBlue or Southwest, still do that game very well, at least in North America. And, as we, shift ahead, look at a lot of categories, not only airlines, of course, big companies. We spent a lot of time with the folks at Marriott, and Marriott has the same sort of philosophy. Bill Marriott, one of the sayings about Bill was his feet never touched his desk. He would never be in the office. He would be in the kitchen talking to the cooks and the waiters. He'd be at the front desk talking to the receptionists. He'd be with the chambermaids talking about how they fluff the pillows. And because he was always out there, employees were used to seeing him walking the walk, and because he was out there, he was able to make sure everyone at Marriott knew their job was to create hospitality and to make their customers welcome, whether they're in an elevator, checking in, or in their room.
Right. Now that's a very good story from Bill Marriott as well. What's one advice that you would give to a new airline starting up?
The one advice I would give to a new airline starting up would be realize that average is over. We spoke to Tom Friedman, who talked a lot about the speed of change, but one of his phrases is average is over. And if you do everything averagely, if you have the right plane and you have the right food service and you have the right routes and everything's sort of okay, you may think you're going to succeed, but you're going to have to break through and, as you said, do something remarkable. Pick one or two signature moments that are going to be remarkable about your experience. And the more relevant it is to the traveler, the better. I think the days of doing funny safety videos are over. You can do the most remarkable, here's how you fasten your seatbelt video, but I don't think it's going to make the airline remarkable anymore. For the first one that did it, maybe years ago with Virgin, it was relevant, but so you have to find something remarkable that's relevant to the customer.
Right.
But if you can do that, because I think the best companies that shift ahead focus on delivering something remarkable that's relevant to the customer and constantly changing it. Just because you hit it today and you have a funny in-flight video today, part of success is, what are you going to do tomorrow? Because once it becomes, oh, I've seen that funny video, or the airline tells a joke when they take off, you need to have it in your culture. You need to have a bit of what Andy Grove, the former Intel CEO, said, only the paranoid survive. So you have to feel like innovation is not something that's on an agenda item. Like, on Tuesday, we're going to do innovation at 3:00, but it has to be part of your culture.
Right. I love the phrase, and my key takeaway is going to be cultivate that signature moment.
Yeah.
And that signature moment will set the airline apart and truly make it.
Cultivate it and keep on iterating off it. Don't just say, we got it and let's just do it. How do we do it better tomorrow? What's the next level of it? Because once you've done it and you feel like you've arrived, you start falling behind the next day.
Right. That's a very, very good advice. I'm sure you fly a lot. Do you have a personal signature moment that, left a mark on you?
Well, I think increasingly today it's technology. That I could be in my meeting at a client, which happened to me last week in Ann Arbor, and I get a text that my flight's delayed, and that they've switched me to another flight, or I already know it's 35 or 40 minutes late, so I'm not going to stress out running to the airport because they've told me in advance that something's going on.
Right. It's the simple things, right? Very, very simple things.
Simple things. So they are, getting more and more skilled at sharing information. And, I realize always flying is going to be uncertain, whether Murphy's Law, whatever. And the more information they feed me in real time that can make me adapt to that. And of course, when they solve the problem for me, then I've been rebooked already on a later flight, and I've been upgraded to business because they feel bad about it. Those things help. But I think today, more and more of our life happens on this, and the better they can integrate into this, not that not that it's going to solve every problem, but ultimately the other thing I'd say is, when I want to not use this, I still want to be able to call you and talk to a live, because when you're stressed and you're late and flights are being canceled, you don't want to totally only rely on a double click to solve the problem.
Right. You want to talk to a human and a person. I think that personal touch
Right.
cannot be eliminated from airlines. Well, thank you very much, Alan, for those insights. Where can we get the book?
Like everything else, it's available on Amazon, but also if you can, support your local bookstore and keep brick and mortar alive. And you can also go to shiftaheadbook.com and order it through that site.
Okay, perfect. I really appreciate the insights. I do want to take a moment to acknowledge you, Alan. I think most people whom you have worked with know, but the rest of the world might not. But I think you've had a tremendous impact on airline brands through your work over the decades. And certainly over me personally, I think you were one of the first people I had reached out to when I was still working in tech in Boston. And you gave me the confidence and encouragement to try and pursue something in the field of aviation marketing. And 10 years on, we're still here.
It's a delight to see you succeed. And I look forward to your next book.
Well, that's a lot of hard work, but I'll keep at it. I'll keep that in mind. But thanks again, Alan, for joining us.
Bye-bye.